morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where for the past few days we've been talking about Hollywood talent that's being held back by its box office numbers, at least for the time being. We've still got our fingers crossed for Mad Max Fury Road, and in fact, if you have not yet seen Mad Max Fury Road, I urge you, I plead with you, to give it a shot this weekend, because the second weekend for the film at the box office is going to be vital in determining the future of not just Mad Max Fury Road, but all of those involved in making it. But today I thought we'd end the week on a positive note, focusing on Hollywood talent that is being propelled forward by its box office numbers. And the first such story is World War Z 2, which finally has a release date. Yes, yesterday, Paramount announced that World War Z 2 would hit theaters in July 2017, going directly up against the Fantastic Four 2, which means that Paramount doesn't have a lot of faith in Fox's ability to reboot that property. But if Fantastic Four overperforms later this year, don't be surprised if World War Z slinks away to another release date. However, World War Z is quite the contender itself. It's coming off of a very strong performance for the first film, but the creative team is very impressive. J.A. Bayona will be taking over from Mark Forster to direct the movie, and J.A. Bayona, this is his chance to step up to the big leagues. He has done a fantastic job with smaller films. His mentor is Guillermo del Toro, but if you've not seen J.A. Bayona films, you're missing out. He did The Orphanage, which is a Spanish-language horror film, one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, and also The Impossible, that recent tsunami film with Naomi Watts and Ewan McGregor. Really, and Tom Holland, by the way, who is, of course, up for the Spider-Man role for Sony and Marvel. So, great filmmaker, and I'm so excited that he's going to move up to the big leagues with this property. I think it's a perfect fit for him. And then also Stephen Knight is going to write, and he, of course, wrote Locke and Eastern Promises. Not a big fan of either of those films, but I didn't dislike them, and I think that Stephen Knight is, I think, in his image, the perfect person for this property. Because it looks like Brad Pitt is continuing to do what he did with the first film. He's the star and producer. And that's really made kind of a prestige blockbuster, an intellectual blockbuster, if you will, a very, very worldly one, which is what I appreciated so much about the first film and what I thought made it seem so fresh. So by bringing in this same kind of talent, I think he's very much going to keep that tone. That might be all he keeps, though, because Stephen Knight's going around telling everybody that they're going to do a fresh, clean start from the first movie, which I think is kind of a shame, because I really liked the first film. Now, I also want to talk about what took so long to get World War Z 2 on the board, right? I mean, they definitely wanted to make it, but what's taken so long for this film to get made? Because after all, the first one made a lot of money at the box office. It made $540 million worldwide, the biggest movie of Brad Pitt's career. And that was not only an impressive box office haul, but a necessary one, because World War Z had a ridiculously big budget. It had around a $200 million budget. And I say that like that because that's what Mad Max Fury Road is wrestling with. So now you can see definitive proof of the kind of box office numbers that Mad Max Fury Road needs to post to get that sequel, around $540 million. And maybe, just maybe, it'll get there. It doesn't have to be exactly there, but it has to be in that ballpark. But why did World War Z have such a big budget? It's because Brad Pitt very publicly acknowledged that the last third of his film, to start with, was pretty crappy. So he went back and reshot, not only reshot, but had the last third of the film rewritten by Damon Lindelof. And there was some really great coverage of Damon Lindelof going to meet with Brad Pitt. Some wonderful articles, I believe, in Vanity Fair. Really, a lot of transparency on the making of World War Z. And to Brad Pitt's credit, he turned that sucker around into a final product that I enjoyed, again, quite a bit. Really liked World War Z. But I think that because there was such a negative reaction from the fans of the novel that Brad Pitt had purchased the film rights to, that Brad Pitt is kind of like doubting, his instincts on the franchise, because people were upset that he really only used the name of the novel and didn't take any of the story points, which is, I think, never a good idea. World War Z is a great title, and I can see why Brad Pitt wanted to purchase it. But I think when something has a fan base, to only take a name only is just asking for trouble. But again, he survived. He more than survived. He thrived. But I think it made Brad Pitt a little gun-shy with the property. Or maybe he just wanted some time to pass. But now, again, they're moving forward, and they're saying with a clean slate. But you can see they're keeping the tone the same, and they have to keep some aspects the same, or it wouldn't be a sequel. But I'm curious to what you guys think. Has enough time passed that you do forgive World War Z and you're on board for the sequel? Did you like the first one like myself? It's okay. You can admit it now. The storm has passed. We can look back on it fondly. And then also, what do you think of the talent that's been attached? You know, you might have been really against the adaptation of the novel to begin with, but when you think of a blockbuster zombie film with Stephen Knight writing, which I know a lot of you are fans of his work and really respect him, and then J.A. Bayona helming, how can you not support that, right? I think that's something else that Brad Pitt is very cleverly doing. But I think Brad Pitt, very savvy producer. He, of course, produced his way to his first Oscar. Didn't get it for acting, got it for 12 Years a Slave. And I think that talent is evident in how he handled the whole World War Z situation. And again, in redoing the movie, the transparency in redoing it, and then how he's handling, you know, bringing the sequel to the big screen. And also, do you think that Mad Max Fury Road has a hope of coming close to World War Z's box office? People like the zombies. The zombies are popular. Also, I don't know if the zombie craze is still, you know, doing really well. We have so many zombie movies at this point. Maybe World War Z will find itself, you know, in its own little zombie apocalypse with, you know, fighting to survive. So that's the first story of the day. I'm excited about it. I can't wait. And Brad Pitt got that sequel again because of the box office numbers of the first film. At the end of the day, that was what was the most important. And he turned a profit. All right, so the second story has to do with James Gunn, who, because he did so well with Guardians of the Galaxy, is not only getting a sequel and is a major player at the House of Marvel, their very own real-life House of M, but he's also writing and producing a little horror film, which is getting a lot of publicity, not only because they're going through a lot of casting announcements right now, but because James Gunn is attached to the movie. His film, The Belko Experiment, would not be getting the coverage that it's getting if it was not coming from James Gunn, and he is in such a great position because of Guardians of the Galaxy. So it's called The Belko Experiment. Again, he's writing and producing. He's not directing because obviously he's prepping Guardians of the Galaxy 2, working very hard on getting that ready to go. But, you know, he's working very hard to promote The Belko Experiment, making these casting announcements on his Facebook page, a little bit like Bryan Singer does with his X-Men announcements, you know, on Facebook and Instagram, etc. So what's the movie about? It is about a bunch of American expats who work on a single company together in Brazil, São Paulo. And one night or day, they find themselves, well, it's a horror movie, so you would assume the night, but they find themselves locked in their office building, and they can't get out, and a voice comes in over the speakers and starts ordering them to kill each other and make like these, you know, moral decisions. It's kind of like Saw meets Die Hard, which I have to say is a pretty compelling elevator pitch. And when you throw James Gunn into the mix, and you can put from the mastermind of Guardians of the Galaxy on the trailer and the posters, it seems like it would be worth the investment for what I'm sure is a pretty cheap movie to make, right? It's got one location, and as you can see from the cast members I'm about to run down, they're not spending a lot of money on talent. So Tony Goldwyn from Scandal, so he certainly has his fans. He's going to be in there as one of the head honchos at the company, you know, one of the big brass. John Gallagher Jr. from Newsroom will also be in the film. Melanie Diaz from Fruitvale Station, she was excellent in that movie. And then John C. McGinley just signed on. He's Dr. Cox from Scrubs. And so, you know, as he makes these casting announcements, James Gunn is also kind of fleshing out what to expect about the movie. And he's also thrown in Office Space into the mix. I think he's muddling his elevator pitch personally, his high concept pitch, but I think Saw meets Die Hard is the much better way to go. And by the way, if you're not aware of that, that's a really old school standard Hollywood practice. When you're pitching a movie, you say it's this meets that, right? So to kind of give somebody an idea of what they're making and how it could potentially perform at the box office. And Saw and Die Hard are obviously two very potent franchises that someone would be happy to have their hybrid baby at their studio. And so directing is Greg McLean. I think this is the one mistake. Greg McLean has just done these two Wolf Creek movies that really didn't go anywhere. I think he's really lowbrow. I think maybe James Gunn, maybe they're friends. They both kind of come. I think James Gunn, before he made Guardians of the Galaxy, would be considered at the same level. But I think that James Gunn should kind of feel that he's risen above that at this point. It's tough. It's a tough decision. You want to reach back and help your friends, right, your peers, and say, come on up to my level. It's pretty awesome up here. I can do whatever I want, including hire you. But at the same time, you know, James Gunn, I think, has to show growth in terms of the kind of filmmaker he is and the type of films that he makes. And I think that nobody, Marvel included, wants to see him go back to kind of like, the sea-level pictures that he was delivering, right? You'd like to think that he would have evolved. So maybe Greg McLean has it in him to deliver this amazing movie, and he just hadn't been given the chance. And so in that case, that would be great. But James Gunn better be pretty darn sure that McLean can deliver, because his name is on the line. I think that when you use your name to sell something, live or die by the movie, he'll also take a pretty big hit if the film isn't well received. People will be like, well, see, James Gunn only works when he's at Marvel. Marvel needs to control him. And also, it'll hurt James Gunn in any arguments that he has with Marvel, with them being able to point to a failure here and saying, look, you don't know what you're doing on your own. We need to interfere, right? But on the other hand, if he does succeed with this film, it'll make him even stronger in his negotiations and discussions with Marvel. But again, he's in this position making this movie because of outstanding box office numbers. Now, for the third story of the day, this is an unfortunate story that developed yesterday, and it was not only unfortunate in what was reported, but how a lot of people reacted to it. And I touched on this when I talked about Reese Witherspoon being cast as Tinkerbell yesterday, and that's that Maggie Gyllenhaal revealed that she had just recently been told at 37 that she was too old to play the romantic interest, the love interest, for an actor in his mid-50s. I believe she said 55. And rightfully so, a number of people across the globe reacted in horror and outrage. And even Maggie Gyllenhaal said, at first I was sad, then I was angry, and then I just laughed about it. And I'm glad she can laugh about it, but at the end of the day, she doesn't have as many roles available to her because of this ridiculous thinking. Now, a lot of the people who were defending this was really weird. They were like, well, maybe it's a script where a guy who's 55 falls in love with someone who's much younger, right? I mean, they were just trying to do a lot of excuses for it, but I think that the whole point of the story is that this underlines that Hollywood, not only, promotes, I think, an unhealthy, view of relationships and who should be with who, but it also shows that while men have roles open to them their entire careers, women have like a sell-by date, right? And that's one of the reasons I think you're seeing women become so aggressive in Hollywood. They're like, well, if you won't give me a role, I'll get my own damn role. And for instance, Sandra Bullock is a great example of someone who really, for a time, couldn't get any work, so she started producing her own movies and really willed herself into having a career. And, she was just recently, and I believe around 50, named, people's most beautiful person. So she's really at the top of her game, and that's all thanks to her. So, but while male actors can have roles offered to them, women have to go and be self-starters. But I think that it's happening for guys too. Look at Brad Pitt. But anyway, I just think it was a really unfortunate story, and again, I was really surprised that people were defending it. And I think that I saw some people point out in message boards, a 55-year-old man with a love interest, even with 37, he could potentially be her father. When you go even younger than that, you have someone dating someone who's young enough to be their granddaughter. And I just think that, Maggie Gyllenhaal, I think surely, she wouldn't even have been up for the role, okay, if it had been a situation where he was supposed to fall in love with someone much younger than himself. They'd be like, I think it was just a generic love interest role, and Hollywood decided, the producers of that film, they just didn't want someone older in the role. And also, a lot of people took a lot of personal attacks at Maggie Gyllenhaal, saying she looks old, and, she doesn't look that great, and she's always looked old, etc., or she's just plain not attractive. And I have to say, I think people are really judgmental about the way women look, and I think that people should be aware that the same judgments are being made about men, but for some reason, women just aren't as vocal about it. And I think maybe the only way that's going to change is if women start piping up and saying, Tom Cruise, you're awesome, but when you put yourself next to a much younger actress, it illustrates and points out that you're actually a lot older than you want everyone to think you are. One of my favorite quotes is actually from Ewan McGregor, who said he stopped doing love scenes, sex scenes. Love scenes. He stopped doing sex scenes because he was tired of being paired with younger and younger actresses. He said, the older I got, the younger the actresses got, and it just got to the point where I looked ridiculous, not only because I was matched up with someone who wasn't an appropriate match with me, but it made me look horrible in comparison. I can't compete with that. So that's why he said he stopped doing those scenes. So very interesting, and I'm glad that he was so vocal about that. I'm glad that everybody's just being a little bit more open. And I think that, what kind of a world is it where a 55-year-old is like, a 37-year-old is too old for me? Just think about that. I'm very curious to hear what you do think about that. All right, so on to the viewer question that comes from The Hump Time. The Hump Time says, Grace, been watching Movie Math Beyond the Trailer for years. Love the show. Question. How hard is it for an actor to break a contract? Would love to see Idris Elba as our Green Lantern in the DCCU, DC Cinematic Universe. I just like to call it DCU, but some people feel it should be called DCCU. And as you can see, it's very hard to say. But anyway, the Hum Time continues saying, wouldn't it be worthwhile to break contract from his minor role with Marvel and take a leading role in a potentially larger blockbuster movie? Thanks! Good question, the Hum Time. I, too, feel that Idris Elba is wasted in his role as Heimdall in the Thor movies. And he had a small part in Avengers, but it was ridiculous. It was almost like they were just like, let's throw Idris Elba a bone, because we really did kind of ruin his superhero career. Now, but breaking a contract, I think, is generally something you don't want to do. It's really not a good idea. Occasionally, actors will break a contract for more money. For instance, Jennifer Lawrence with the Hunger Games movie, or Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson for 50 Shades of Grey. They'll say, I know I signed on for 2 more movies, but I'm not doing it unless you pay me more. And the idea is that it'll cost so much more money to find new talent, establish that talent with the audience that's already attached to the original actors, and the delay in finding that new talent, delaying the sequel, that at the end of the day, it's worth just paying more money to the original actor, even though they contractually were supposed to work for less. That's the logic there, and it's worked. So you can't blame talent going forward for trying the same thing. But that's not really breaking a contract, because the actor isn't trying to leave, they just want more money. Breaking a contract, though, I think would kind of make you really look bad to the rest of Hollywood. I mean, look at Edgar Wright. He's having a really hard time rebounding from what happened with him in Marvel. He was up for Star Trek 3, didn't get it. And you have to think that Paramount probably looked at what happened and say, I don't want Edgar Wright walking off of my movie either, right? So I think that breaking a contract, Hollywood's a small town. So if you break the contract, first of all, there could be litigation. Especially because Marvel wouldn't want, you to go and create a competing, Green Lantern franchise in the same comic book space, so there could be litigation. Litigation is not unheard of in Hollywood. It's usually a last resort because, one person starts to sue, there'll be like a suing avalanche. But it could happen. But I just think the real problem would be the damage to one's image and how the other studios would feel they just don't want to work with you because you're not loyal. I think loyalty is considered very important. Also, Idris Elba, while not such a great role in the Thor movies, Disney is rewarding him. He's part of the Disney family now, and he's doing voices in not only the upcoming Jungle Book live-action fairy tale adaptation by Jon Favreau, but he's doing Shere Khan, which is a pretty cool role, and the motion capture for that. But he's also doing a voice in Finding Dory. So those are pretty cushy gigs. You can do them really fast. You get paid a decent amount of money, and you get to go and be part of the whole publicity machine for those big movies. So, and also if you have a family, you get to go take them to Disneyland or Disney World. It's pretty nice. It's pretty cushy. So I think he's like, why should I throw that away and make myself persona non grata, not just to Disney, but all the studios? And he does have Star Trek 3 coming up. So, he's been a good soldier, he's done his work, and, he might be rewarded with this, this other film. Ironically, the one that they would give to Edgar Wright, who did break his contract with Disney. So I think that while it's unfortunate, I think Idris Elba, just like I often say here, signed the best contract he could at the time. That was the best role that was being offered to him. I think it did help raise his profile. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. But, Jon Stewart isn't even on the table at DC. They're not even thinking of making a movie with Jon Stewart as the Green Lantern. They're still focused on Hal Jordan. So he definitely isn't going to break a contract for a role that doesn't even exist. So that's my answer to that. If Idris Elba asked me, I'd be like, it's not worth it, Idris Elba. Live to fight another day and enjoy the spoils of a relationship with Disney. So that's my answer. Thank you so much, the Hum Time. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question. Anything you'd like to see covered on Tuesday because of Memorial Day. Morning Movie News will be back on Tuesday, and Movie Math will air that day as well. And then, of course, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.